it has what we call a coupon rate associated with it, and that's the interest rate that the district is making payments on. The bonds are typically sold at a premium above or a discount below the coupon rate, which means that you're not getting exactly $5,000 for that bond that you sold. If you sold it for a premium, it means the investor's actually paying you more than $5,000. If you sold it at a discount, they're paying you less than $5,000. And buyers want premiums or discounts based on where they think interest rates are going in the future. They are protecting themselves or hedging themselves from future interest rate volatility. So, given where we've been in the market since 2012, the market has, in general, had an opinion that rates were going to rise in the future. So investors have heavily demanded premium bonds to protect themselves from those future increases in interest rates. So what that means is when you sell a bond at a premium, you get more than the face value for the bond. You sell a $5,000 bond, you get $5,500 for it. You pay the extra $500 or whatever the premium is back as interest expense. It is not free money. It's just interest, okay, that you're getting paid up front, and then you pay it back over the life of the bond. All right, so these bonds, every single one of them you sold has either a premium or a discount number. This one has $591,000 of premium. This one actually has a discount of $69,000, and so on and so forth. The total premium came out to be about $2.5 million on the bonds that you sold. I think if we run through this table here, this little summary table, it will show you how we get to how much you sold and what it all belongs to.
Before you go there,
Yeah.
I'm trying to get through my head why an investor wouldn't want a high rate, because I'm getting that.
They do want the high rate. So let's say that interest rate when you sold a bond was 3%. The buyer wants 4 because he thinks rates are going to go up. You give him 4, but the rate in the market is actually 3. So in exchange for the 4, instead of the market rate of 3, he pays you more than $5,000 for his $5,000 bond. So he's paying you upfront extra, in that example, be more than $500 after $1,000 or something. He's going to pay you upfront so that over the life of the bond, you're going to pay him an above market rate of return.
But then we pay 4%. 5,500.
No, you pay 4% on 5,000.
Okay.
Because the 500 he gave you is basically interest expense up front. Okay?
But if we would have borrowed just the 5,000, our interest rate could have been lower.
Well, you are borrowing just the 5,000, but you're borrowing it at 4% instead of 3. And he gave you the difference up front. Okay? What we're debating is he gave you the difference up front. What did you use it for?
Right.
Okay? And it's perfectly legal to do exactly what you did, and almost every borrower in the municipal bond market does exactly what you did, which is that you took the difference, the extra, in this case, $2.5 million, and you used it for project expenses. It's project dollars. It went straight in the project fund. It didn't go to the district's operating budget. It didn't pay salaries. It went straight into the building project. Okay? But now you have to pay that interest expense back over the life of the bond. So it's not free. Okay? Does that make sense? Sort of?
It makes sense. I'm just trying to get through my head what reason I would tell the taxpayer that I borrowed more than 35 that they told us tomorrow.
And I mean,
I've come up with none yet. I'm hoping you can help me.
the investors demanded the premium. The question is, I mean, you honestly would have had trouble selling the bonds without the premium because at the time, that's what investors were demanding. So that's the answer. The question is then, what did you do with the premium?
Or do you take it?
Right. Where'd you put it? What'd you do with it? Okay. You guys used it for the project, 100% legal. You used it as according to the ballot language. All right. So What we have here is 35 million of voter authorization. Of the voter authorized bonds, you have sold 32.82 million of those bonds because this 1.7 million is working cash and it doesn't count. Okay, so 32.87 are the sum of all of these 4 bond issues. Okay, that gets you to 32.87. That gets you to your remaining referendum authority of 2.18 million. So you still have voter authorized but unsold 2.18 million of face value of bonds. That doesn't count the premium. That's just face value of bonds. Okay? Then down here we look at, then you have your 32.8 million of referendum bonds sold plus 1.7 million of working cash fund bonds sold. You sold 34.5 million, this number right here, of total bonds that you used toward the project in face value. Again, not counting the premium, right? So the working cash fund, which actually the working cash fund bonds, you didn't really use toward the project. You used to fix the problem in the capital projects fund, okay? But I'm counting it in this analysis.
Well, because at the time, wasn't there, the prior board made the promise that they still wouldn't go over 35, am I saying that right?
When, let's say it again. When we did the working cash thing?
The reason we put it on the schedule is the board at the time made a promise, if you will, that that would be part of the 35 million.
That's, my personal recollection was that was how I got my head around it being okay.
Yeah, me too. That basically, it was a verbal commitment to the public that we would take the 35 million, but we would reduce it by the 1.7 and to make it available amount of 33.3.
That's my recollection as well. So that's why I have it included in here.
Right.
Okay. So that's why you have total face value bonds sold of about 34.5 million. And then the bond premium funded $1.6 million. After you pay costs, we have $2.5 million of premium that you sold up here, but you sold a bunch of what we call capitalized interest of almost 600,000. That's basically interest expense on the bonds paid from the bonds to keep the tax rate from going over the 70-cent target. Okay? Again, 100% legal. It's just a tool to keep that tax rate promise that you made to the voters.
Where do you get 600 in capitalized interest, and I only see
Oh, I'm sorry, I
350.
have it flipped. Yeah, it's 350. The costs are 580.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we rolled the interest that was due into the loan at the time.
That 350 you did,
Oh
yes.
my.
Yes. Yes. To keep the tax rate down. Okay, so if I take the $2.5 million of original issue premium up here and you subtract this 900-ish thousand, 920, that's where I get the net premium that went to the project fund is $1.6 million. So money you have deposited in the project fund is $36,120,000. So that's the point of all this math, okay? So you've sold 34.5 million of face value on bonds. You deposited 36.12 million into the project funds because of the premium. That's how you were able to get over the 35 million. And you sold 1.7 million of working cash that doesn't actually count, but we're counting it because of the discussion we just had. Okay.
So 2 questions. Refresh me again what the cost line item was for.
That
Did I miss
is
that?
everything that you pay when you issue bonds. You pay for credit ratings, you pay a number of different lawyers, you pay for bond insurance that elevates the district's credit rating up to the highest notch, you pay us as underwriter, you pay PMA as financial advisor, you pay a bank trustee fee, you pay a
Yep.
CPA. Like the big ones are kind of those first, like,
Managers,
4 or 5.
sellers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, our fee is mostly sales commission to brokers that sell the bonds. Okay?
And then what was my other question? Oh, when we go to, at the end of the day, will we pay back 35 million par value or 36.120 in principal?
You will pay back 34.5 million of par. That's 3612, the 16. This number will be in the interest column. You will pay it back, but it's not principal, it's interest. And obviously there'll be other interest. All the other interest on the bonds will be in that column as well.
So can you elaborate on that? Okay, so, right, because when you, at the end of the game, the seller gets par, you know, I mean.
That's right.
Okay, at the end of the
He gets
game.
$5,000.
So, but this premium is really, is this, this isn't really well, isn't the.
It's not principal, it
It's
is
not,
interest.
okay, yeah,
It is 100% interest.
okay.
So it's not growing over that time period.
No, you're not paying interest on interest.
Right. But we
You're
didn't set
just
it
paying
aside
a
to
higher
pay it back.
interest rate,
Right.
Okay,
okay? Because the buyer wanted a 4 instead of a 3, and he paid you up front to get the 4.
So we're gonna pay 36.12 plus 3% on 34.5.
That's exactly right.
Over what period?
In my
Over
opinion,
what period of time?
The 20-year life of the bond.
Have
I
we
mean,
done-
each of these bond issues has sort of a
Do
different.
we have some sort of sheet that calculates out what that's going to be down there?
yeah. Okay, so repeat what you said, Brandon.
So it's, what he said was, you're going to repay $1.6 million in interest expense.
Right.
Plus 3%, using my example numbers, which are not real numbers. okay,
Right.
But using my example numbers, 3% on the 34.5 million. Because the 4%
Right.
is already baked into the spread between the real rate and what the buyer wanted is this 1.6 million that you're gonna pay back. The interest you're paying on the 34.5 is the market rate, which in my example was 3.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. All right, does that make a little bit of sense?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right, we're gonna talk about the refunding really quickly. Okay, so you move to page 9. Remember you have those Build America bonds that we talked about back on page 3 or whatever it was? Build America bonds were part of the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act program. The federal government pays you an interest subsidy on those bonds, which has been haircut over the last 5 years, 4 years, due to sequestration, so you're not getting your full subsidy. You did have a problem with the IRS about historical subsidy payments that had been messed up. That has since been cleaned up. So that issue's not hanging up out there for you anymore. We have refinanced some of these bonds as we've gone along, but you do still have a small amount of them outstanding. So let's move to page 11.
Before you do that, what was the original interest rate on the 9.5 million?
Let's see if I've got that. It ranged between 5% and a 5.95.
So call it 5.5 times 0.35. Oops, wrong way.
Yeah, times 0.65.
We're paying 3.5-ish. Take that times 0.006.
For the sequestration. You have to take the,
They changed the math on that too.
yeah, well, it changes every year. It's
Instead of 6, it's 6.7 or
0.007,
something.
yeah.
Right.
I think you can get there.
Trying to figure out what the haircut is. So it'd be, well, 5.5 minus 3 point, what'd I say, 7? Is the government subsidy times 6% is 0.1.
That should be accurate. It's not a big number, especially since we've already refinanced a lot.
So go from 3.7 to 3.6,
Right.
like that, okay?
Okay. All right, so page 11. So you only have about 3 million of these bonds left. We've already refinanced a number of them and taken some savings and gone home. So we have about 3 million of these left. If you want, you can save a little bit of money by refinancing them. It's not, as we talked about last time I was here, this is not something I would probably stand on my head about recommending that you do on a standalone basis. But if you do decide to move forward with any portion of the remaining voter authorized bonds, it would make sense to wrap this in. So we'd be selling about $3 million of new bonds. The new interest rate is 2.62% at current market. Obviously, it'll change between now and whenever you finalize it. Total cash flow savings, net of your costs, are $155,000. It's about 20 grand a year. Savings are 4.7% of par of the amount you're refinancing. Our industry standard is you want the savings to be at least 3% of what you're refinancing after you pay your costs. So it hits the standard. It's not a grand slam, but certainly worth your consideration. If rates hold, it's very interest rate sensitive. So if the market jumps 25 basis points, you won't want to do it. It just won't make sense. Okay.
So 2.6 is what rates are currently?
For this is a very short-term bond. It only goes to 2025.
Okay.
So it's short. Just a 7-year bond.
And we wouldn't add years on if we did
No,
that.
I'm not extending it. This is just a straight. And that 19 grand a year is just gets passed directly to the taxpayers. It doesn't help the district's operating budget. It's literally just lowering your bond payment. Okay? All right, so that's the refinancing. Okay, slide 12 just shows you basically the bond refinancing has no impact on the tax rate. While the 20 grand does get passed directly to the taxpayers, your EAV is so big that 20 grand is literally a rounding error. Okay, so the peach column is the tax rate before the refinancing, and this blue column is the tax rate after the refinancing, and it literally doesn't show because it's all the way out to the 4th decimal place. Okay, so that's the point of this, is that you're not doing the refinancing because it has a big impact to the taxpayers. It also, because there are no principal payments on these bonds until 2022, there's no savings until, I can read it on the screen. There's no savings until you start paying principal, which is in the 4th year. So in the 4th year, we go from 67 cents, 67.1 to 66.8, so it's 0.003 cents. Okay, it's a third of a penny, and you get it in year 4. Okay. All right, so that's it for this slide. All right, so let's go one more slide to slide 14. All right, so here's where you are in your current bonds. Each of these column totals represent principal plus interest. So getting back to your earlier question, do we have something that tracks all the interest expense? I can do it in like any hideous detail that you want to see. But these are the summary numbers. So for each bond issue, you can see how much principal plus interest is for each one. And this is the tax rate that you just saw on the prior slide for your current bonds. The target when you sold the bonds to the voters was 70 cents. And that's what we structured all of these bonds on, was to not exceed 70 cents. You can see we are at 67.5 cents. We're 2.5 cents below what you promised the voters. That's because your assessed valuation has continued to grow at a pretty nice rate, unlike a lot of your neighbors who have had negative EAV growth over the last 8 years. You've continued to have positive. So we're below the promise to the voters here. And this is how your current bonds look right now. And that's based on future EAV growth of 2.5%. So to the extent you get something above 2.5%, this number will continue to drop over time. Okay?
And I think Charlotte provided that number of 2.5% growth. Charlotte, you checked into that, didn't you? The 2.5%?
We did a lot of work backing into that.
To get that.
Okay, yeah, we looked at all your historical numbers.
Right,
and
okay.
looked at
It's
building
well
permits
researched.
and- Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
that's what I remember.
I think it's a conservative number, but
Okay.
it's,
It does appear on page 3 that our debt payment per year is rising about 9%. So that's probably more troubling than me.
it's not. Let me see what you're looking at.
So that you name it. So somehow.
Okay, the one I picked is 9%. Some of them are 5%.
You just mean the difference between these numbers?
No, the total dollars. The check we write
So
is increasing.
this column?
Yeah.
Well, that's just principal. So it's not counting the interest, and on the front end, you have more, just like your mortgage, right? Your home mortgage is front-end loaded interest and back-end loaded principal. So this is exactly the same way. What you need to look at is what we were just looking at on slide 15. You have to, sorry, Betsy. Hold on one second. You have to look at, 14, no, one more, yeah. Oh, no, actually 14's right, that'll work. Look at this column right here. That says total DS, that stands for total debt service. That's principal plus interest on all outstanding bonds.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
So if we stay on the current amortization schedule, we borrowed 35 million, what we borrowed, when you're all said and done, we follow that schedule, we end up paying back $60 million, is that right?
Well, that includes other bonds that were not part of the 35 million of voter authorization.
But I'm saying bottom line is we're on the hook for $60 million at the end of the amortization of this bond.
Yes, but it's not 35 million plus 25 million of interest on the 35 million. It's 35 million plus
Each one of these is a-
bonds you sold.
No, I get that, I'm just
Okay.
trying to net to the end what.
Yeah, it's right down here.
Yeah, you're right. If you do owe currently 60 million of principal and interest.
Right.
And unless we decrease that by paying it back at an accelerated rate, that's what we'll do.
Yes. Okay. All right, so if you look at page 15, I ran just two options for you. If you want to look at selling the remaining voter authorization, the 2.18 million, this is what you have left. You can sell if you want, but you only have until November. Okay? If you want to do it and we want to target the 70-cent tax rate that was originally promised to the voters, that equates into an 11-year payback. That's how long it takes us to pay it back and stay at that 70-cent tax rate, because remember right now we're at 67 and a half. Okay, so it's causing a 2.5-cent increase back up to the 70 cents. That will change every year that this EAD is not 2.5% increase. If it increases by 4, if it decreases by 1, every year we don't hit 2.5, it ripples through to this changing. Okay? So we can do 2.18 million over 11 years, or I ran another option on the next page, which is 2.8 million over 4 years, basically taking you up to more like 75 cents, just to show you the difference between the two. And the interest expense difference between those two is about $330,000. So by cutting it more than half, you're saving 300-ish thousand of interest expense. Okay. There's a little bit of a market update on one of the future slides, just to show you what interest rates have been doing. We are down, again, this summer we're down from the last time I talked to you guys. Rates have come down. So we're in a nice little downward trend that is helping that BABS refund make sense for you. And then I did give you a little timeline.
Are these based off the 210 or 30? Or does it
They're
depend?
based off the municipal market, which does not identically track either. They're based off of a bond index we call municipal market data. So.
Okay.
It's real bond market pricing.
That's
And that line's not on there?
It's the MMD.
I'm sorry?
It's the MMD line.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the MMD line, which is on there. It should, is it?
Yeah, it's on
It
there.
didn't come out in that
Yeah,
copy.
it came here,
Yeah.
an original.
The orange one?
Yeah, it's the orange one. In this bottom, well, it's
Yeah.
all of these in the, it's the bottom graph. This is MMD.
Okay.
I have just a couple quick questions, and maybe this is the wrong spot for that. What happens if we do not sell that additional bonds by November? They're just gone?
Yep. Yeah, that's definitely a use it or lose it thing.
If we do, obviously, we're bound by the referendum on what we can use it for. Are we bound on a period of time in which we have to use it for that stuff?
You have 3 years to spend it, and if you don't spend it in that time frame, it triggers some different IRS tracking and reporting mechanisms.
3 years from the issuance of the bond?
Yes.
Actually, Ian, we had a finance committee meeting, and Charlotte, did you speak to Linda at Chapman Cutler directly? Could you provide some more detailed information?
Linda indicated the only thing we would need to do is on March 2nd, we cannot have it be sitting in an investment account that is getting more money than we would have on the bond. So I think that's 1.9, so we have to make sure that we invest it at a rate that's lower than the 1.9.
Which relates to current bond funds you have on hand. Anybody have open minute?
And that's March 2nd of
I just have
2018?
that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's a stipulation that if we did sell that money and we had a way to make more money on it,
We can't.
to help us with debt service, we can't do that?
No, because that's arbitraging.
Because you're selling these bonds at tax exempt interest rates. The federal government hates tax exempt anything. So what they don't want you to do is make money off of their tax exempt status.
We're not buying.
So it's called arbitrage and
Just figure out a way to screw me out of mine. I can't be screwing out of theirs.
Yeah.
And Charlotte, there were a couple other points that were, that you mentioned. One was that once we put it in some instrument where the interest rate was, really, really low, didn't Linda provide some additional comments about that?
She said because we made the original commitment when we issued it to spend the money in 3 years, it would just be a good idea if we tried to get that money spent instead of hanging on to it for another 5 years.
Okay.
And it's my understanding that if we issued, and Ann, correct me if I'm wrong, but if we issued the 2.18, the clock on when we have to spend that starts ticking on the date you sell those bonds, correct? So whenever you sold those bonds, we would have another 3 years in which to spend the 2.18 million.
Every bond.
That's a separate issue from spending the remainder of the capital monies we have on hand now, which that is the March 2018.
Are you guys expecting a significant increase in interest rates?
Not a significant increase. I do think the Fed is likely to take one more stab at short-term rates this year, but the market's really baked most of that in already, at least on the municipal side. We are showing an upward trend in rates this year, but not massive. And we are seeing more of a downward trend this summer than what we expected. Long term.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, it's not doing what everybody thought it would do.
So at this point, I'm just here to answer questions. The intent is, if you guys want to move forward, that at your meeting in July, that you would vote and tell us that you want to move forward. You wouldn't be actually taking official action, approving a bond resolution at that point. You would just be giving us direction. And then we would be back to you in August with official action. But we basically have to be done with selling the 2.18 million by November 1st or 5th, or I'd have to go back and check the actual election date.
Yeah.
But just call it November 1 to be safe. We have to be done if you want to move forward. And it takes a minimum of 2 months to get the bond sold, just because we have to go through bond credit rating and create a prospectus. All of which we go through every time. So that is my advance for the, I don't know, well, I feel sorry for you guys for saying listen to this.
It's making more sense.
Pretty soon,
Yeah. Okay, so, I pulled out the presentation from January of 2017. And I have a bunch of notes scribbled on here. So, back then, it was, the 2.3 million was the number that was quoted. And it was about 1.7 for working capital. I mean, working capital. Working cash, right. And then, about 600 that is still sitting on the table as yet unissued, correct?
Yeah, I mean, that's going back
Is that correct?
well, I mean, it depends on how you guys want to slice these numbers, right? If we go back to page 7,
Right.
I mean, where that came from, Susan, is we said, first of all, there was a mathematical calculation in PMA's calculation in January, so it was about, that said 2.3 million, it's actually 2.18. So,
back here?
yeah, all those 2.3s should be 2.18. So this number has increased by that same 120,000 number. This used to be
Okay.
34.4. So the 600,000 that you're quoting is just the difference between the total par amount of project bonds sold and 35 million.
Okay.
Okay,
Let's see.
that's how we got 600,000. That's one way you guys can slice this if you want. You can say, it makes sense to us, the school board, to sell, in this case, using my revised corrected numbers, 500,000 of the remaining voter authorization, because you have sold 1.7 million of working cash that you're gonna count. Okay?
Right.
All right? And then you only, if we're gonna count the working cash toward the 35, then you only have 500,000-ish, 480 actually, of remaining voter authorization. But you don't have to count the working cash,
Right.
because legally, it's not part of what the voters approved.
Right.
That's just you guys evaluating it and calling it part of what the voters approved, because that's a decision
Right.
you may make, but you legally don't have to. if that
Okay,
makes sense.
so, yeah, I've listened to this a number of times and it's still, I'm getting more. Okay, so I just wanted to put this in the most basic of terms, just to help me. Unfortunately, the resolution wording doesn't say 35 million net
Right,
of
no.
discount
Right,
or
no,
premiums.
no.
Unfortunately, it
Right.
doesn't say that. So, am I correct?
Which is why you're legally allowed to do exactly what you did, because it doesn't say, it says 35 million of par.
Right.
Of face value, and that's what you did.
Right.
Well, you've actually sold 32.8 million of par of face value.
Right.
Okay? That's why it's 100% fine to do what you did, because the ballot language doesn't say plus premium.
Yeah, right, okay, yeah.
So, can I ask a question?
Yeah, go on.
So you ran two scenarios for us in terms of how fast we paid this. I know they were just, but Charlotte, what are our thoughts as you guys are looking at whether or not we sold these bonds? What are we gonna budget? What is the time frame we're budgeting to pay this all back?
On the 2.18,
Or however this is, because I'm assuming that this debt service scenario we're looking at here was to get rid of, yeah, it's on the 2.8 only.
well, I'm actually the one that asked Ann to run the numbers for paying it back over 4 years. I know that pushes you above the 70 cents, but when we originally ran the numbers based on rates at that time, we were saving $500,000. But things have changed, and now that savings is only $300,000. So the question is saving $300,000 over the course of 4 years worth letting that 70 cents rise a little bit? And it only rises during the 4 years you're paying it back.
Well, and I guess one thing I'm looking at is if we have an outlay if we all sat down and said, these are the projects we need to have done, and we had a time frame of how fast the projects need to have done, if we're able to budget 500 to 600 grand a year to pay back on debt service, well, what if we had a $1.1 million project that we could pay off ourselves in 2 years? Is what you know what I'm saying? Am I making sense?
The money's not fungible, okay, because the.
No, I'm talking about if we didn't get this money.
Right.
If we've got 600 grand a year to spend on debt service,
But you don't, because the 600 grand a year comes from the debt service levy that you can't otherwise collect unless you actually sell the bonds.
oh,
Okay, because your debt service levy is like a standalone, untouchable levy. And you can only levy in your debt service levy right now, 67.5 cents, that can only be used to pay bonds. So if we want to create a $600,000 increase in the debt service levy, you can, but only to pay back bonds. You can't levy the extra 600 grand in debt service to do projects.
but this levy is within the levy that we already,
It is.
we're not pulling additional tax dollars from the taxpayer. Like,
If you borrow,
you're-
Yeah, we would be.
Yeah.
well,
It
over
would
time.
fluctuate.
if you borrow it, you have to pay it back. And that comes to the point you made earlier is when you said the discount that we got up front, what did you do with it? The only way that we don't pay back more than 35 million is if we took that 1.6 and put it in a fund and let it sit there for interest later.
Well, you're still paying back 35 million, but in this case, you're actually paying back 32.8 million, but whatever. You're
No,
still
okay,
paying back
wait.
35 million, it's a question of at what interest rate. Okay, and under the current scenario, you're paying it back at the premium above market interest rate that includes the 1.6 million in premium, but the face value you're paying back is still either 32.8 or 34.5, depending on whether you want to include the working cash.
But they gave us the interest up front.
They did,
And we spent it,
that's right.
so
So
we don't
you have
got
to
the
pay it
interest
back,
anymore.
But in interest, right.
So,
I neglected to walk you guys through this one-page handout that I didn't put in the book because I did it just today. So everybody has that. Maybe this puts a little bit in perspective. So this is just showing you for each option. So option 1 is the 11-year payback. Option 2 is the 4-year payback. We'll talk about the last option in a second. This is on a market value house of $180,000. So if you could sell the house, it's worth 180 grand, which means its equalized assessed value is 60,000. After you take off the homestead exemption of 6,000, the net, the net EAV that they're paying taxes on is 54,000. And we divide it by 100, this is how we calculate taxes that are paid, times the change in the B&I tax rate, that's your bond and interest or debt service tax rate. Option 1 causes a 3-cent tax increase, it's actually 2.5, these are all rounded up. Option 2 creates a 7-cent tax increase. So we take that, I don't have it on the screen, sorry. We take each of those and apply it to the EAV of the house. So you can see option 1 would cause a $14 tax increase for the year for that homeowner. Or his bond and interest tax bill goes up 14 bucks
For 11 years.
for 11 years.
Yeah,
That's right,
okay.
yes.
and this is where we give our speech, that if 10 other bodies in town are doing this, it's 140 bucks.
Right.
And if it's only 14 bucks, that's not gonna make or break the school, so let's just leave it be. There's two sides to that.
Right, absolutely, right. Option 2 is $38, that's the 4-year payback. And then the last option that Charlotte asked me to run for you is if you pay back $1.2 million, we could talk about if that's, should be $1.6 million, I mean, whatever you guys want to do. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, but if you want to pay back some of the premium to the voters, what would that be worth to them? I ran $1.2 million over 5 years, and that's a $17 tax increase. Or I'm sorry, decrease for that 5 years for that same homeowner.
So where would the numbers be at if it was going to be neutral to the homeowner?
Well, I mean, option one is neutral in the sense that it's just going back to the 70-cent tax rate that you were at 2 years ago. But I don't think you want me to run it neutral, because if I run it neutral, it will be a really long payback. So, I mean, this is 11 years, and that's taking you from 67.5 cents to 70. If I leave you at 67.5 cents, I have to put, can we go back a couple pages, Betsy? Let's go back, or no, I'm sorry, forward. Go to page, back to, I think it's 14. Yeah, 14.
I know that.
So, because if you look at this, your tax rate is all the way up at that upper 60s number until the very last year. So if I run you a scenario where I'm not causing a tax increase, I put all the bonds out here.
You know what I mean?
You will not claim it. You will pay as much in interest as you're getting in principal.
What page is that?
This is 14.
Okay, one of the, I think that's true. But one of the things that I think I'd like to say, and I've seen the schedule, it's like this long, it's huge. But one of the things that happened is prior to the approval of this 35 million, our rate was, it took a big jump as a result of issuing this 35 million. You know, under the prior Superintendent Bolts in the early part of Gillum, you know, it was high 50s, low 60s. So for me, I'm not troubled that it's, you know, our rate is, that it's coming down.
No,
I am not troubled at all.
I'm never troubled by that.
Yeah, I know. I mean, but on the other hand, Russ, what was his name?
Clipper.
Oh, yeah. He's the one who said, he always just says, oh, don't let that rate drop, don't let that rate drop. Well, I'm not adverse to letting the rate drop.
Yeah, I understand. I will get.
So what were you guys talking about? What were we talking about?
Cleaning it up faster versus cleaning it up slower.
Okay.
Because what happens if we have an exponential explosion of people in the district, we need to go back out and get a bond referendum to build new stuff. We've got this big balance already, versus if we lowered it, we have less to do with it.
Well, and I just always think about the state, and if, although everybody's already said, I'm dumbing it down, but this is already part of this. If everybody's willing to give us 40 more bucks a year, if we said no to remaining money here, but figured out a way to ask the taxpayers for that 40 bucks to be able to put in a different fund, and then we put it towards our education issues versus a building, I don't know, you know what I mean?
No, I know. Right.
It's just, I mean, it's only, you look at it and go, it's only 14 bucks or only 40 bucks, but in the end, it's a lot of money.
And that's, I think what we have to decide by next month is at what level are we going, and are we, that 1.7 million, is that in or out? So we got two questions to answer, am I correct?
For me, just reading this November 2012 ballot language, maybe I'm totally wrong in this, but I don't think anyone who voted on that understood that it may be 36.2 million when they were voting it on 35 million. I understand it's totally legal, get all that, and not that it would have mattered, and I'm sure it's implied, but it doesn't reference par level, it doesn't reference face value. It says in the amount of $35 million. So, I mean, I just have to be honest, that number sticks out.
Well, as a taxpayer that doesn't know what's going on, they're gonna go, you needed 35, you got 36, and now you want more.
Right.
I don't understand.
I already agreed to give you 35, and you went ahead and sent me a bill for 36, and now you want more. That becomes I think, a more challenging sale if we do need to go down that route down the road, where we do need to ask again.
I don't know how many times I've listened to this, quite a few. But you're exactly right, Bill. It was, basically in January of 2015, that this issue came forward. And it was a pretty complicated discussion, just on the premium alone. So, and the majority of the board passed it. But part of it was pretty complicated. So.
It's very complicated.
We can't say we haven't had the information.
So, yeah, I mean, it's just an option. You know what I mean? The sky won't fall if you don't sell the bonds. The sky probably won't fall if you do sell the bonds. It's an option. It's just a tool in your tool belt, but it does happen to have a deadline. So it's just something for you to.
And one of the option is including that 1.7 to sell the remaining value of bonds to get up to the total of 35.
Right, which it would be only just about $500,000. It's not a lot, but yes.
So it's not 2.18 or nothing. You can.
No, all you could do, you could sell 1.5. You can do anything you want, up to 2.18.
Probably, and I guess this is a question at hand, the question that the current board needs to ask is, for your decision at hand and the discussion that took place in January of 2015, which is among the board members, it's probably, if you can zoom through to the agenda where we talked about this, to what extent currently do you want to accept or try to amend and modify through our current decisions that initial decision of turning that premium into debt monies? I think that's really the question at hand. And now it's a new board, so.
That's one of the two questions, yep.
Yep.
You certainly know your bonds. This is very helpful, so.
Thank you. If you understand all of this, then I had a slightly successful night, because it's really complicated, it really is. So I commend you all for trying to understand all my gibberish, because most boards really do not, they don't even try, they really don't. So I give you full credit for, we'll have these conversations with the administration perhaps, but the board just doesn't even want to way over what they want to think about, so.
Well, that's part of our problem, is 20 years later down the road, everybody goes, well, how in the hell did we get here?
That's right.
And it's because everybody said yes without asking a question.
Yeah, it's not an easy topic, so.
Do you have the second part of your presentation ready?
Do I have what?
Second part of your presentation ready?
No.
Still lie down.
I could do the amended budget, maybe.
Thank you very much, Ann.
Ann, thank you.
Everybody done with Ann? No more questions?
We need to talk to you at the end of the meeting, just.
I got Director Rockford.
Was this the fifth time?
I think, yes. But I have to go back and, I think.
Okay, but I have a question to ask you. Who among your clients have as many debt issuances as we do, outside of St. Louis and outside of the Chicago Public Schools? How many?
Oh, lots.
Lots? That was in your region?
Were you talking total dollars, are you talking 70 cents, or there's several?
No, I'm talking total dollars, number of issuances.
It's not that uncommon. It's,
Okay.
if you go, out into the more rural districts, that would not be common. But,
Right. Yeah.
Champaign, Urbana, Peoria,
Rockford,
Decatur, Rockford, Freeport, Belvedere.
Okay, right.
Marion, Carterville, it goes on and on. All you have to do is find a district with, enrollment over 4,000 students.
Yeah.
And they probably are up there with that.
Okay, that's good. Well, the good news is, Ann, that we have staggering board terms, so,
It's always new blood.
yeah.
So,
But that's good,
thank you for your
Thank you.
considerable time. So,
Be safe.
Have a good
Yeah, thanks, Ann.
Drive safe.
All right, moving on, 7.2, we've got amended budget for FY17.
Right. The original budget, which is listed here on top, you can tell that we have total revenues of the 38, and this is all funds. But if you look at just our, well, all funds are here, I'm sorry. These are our operating funds. That changes with the amended budget. We had, I gotta get my glasses on, sorry. If I'd left them on, I couldn't have seen any of that. Now I've got to put them on to see this. We have additional revenues of $974,212. It's realized from additional general state aid, federal and state grants, and property taxes. And if you remember when I introduced the budget, I didn't trust the state of Illinois was going to give us all that general state aid, and lo and behold, they did. And so that really put more money into our pocket in general state aid, not in categoricals. There's a reduction in expenditures of $5,100,556. That's primarily due to projects that was going to be coming out of Fund 60 and then out of Fund 90 that didn't occur this year. Those are going to be pushed off into next year. And I want to point out that although you see our fund balances growing with the amended budget, I want to point out that we're still deficit spending. And I'm just going to use the Ed Fund as an example. So far we've collected $9,688,464 in property tax that is meant for next year. It's been deposited in that fund balance. That ending fund balance should be at least that $9.6 million. It's not. It's at $6.6 million. So we're better than we were last year in spending those early taxes. We've still got a ways to go. We're slowly turning that ship around. So that was the big thing I wanted to point out. And I felt it was important to amend the budget because I could get the numbers closer than what I did back in September. And quite frankly, I wanted to be a little selfish. I'd never filed an amended budget before. I just wanted to know what the process was. How do I do it? I wanted to get a feel for the process. Yes.
Just to clarify what you said, because we've gone over this too several times. We are not, in this year, we are not deficit spending. Our budget's in the black for this year, but in the past, we'd been going negative right at year end because we ran out of money, and that amount of negative is less.
Yes.
Well,
it's called deficit spending because you are spending money intended for next year. That's where the term deficit spending comes in. And we did run out of money. I mean, I borrowed $2 million from working cash. Thank goodness we had it. Didn't cost us anything. But I had to go to Bank of Springfield and borrow $1.3 million, which cost us over $2,500 in interest.
Actually, it did cost us something. The $1.9 million did cost us something. The interest expense through the bonds, right?
Well,
yeah. I mean, it doesn't matter. But, okay, so one of the things that I would like to say is you've been we've attended, Dwayne and I have attended finance committee meetings, since the first of the year, Charlotte, and you have done a fantastic job on so many issues. I mean, it's just been wonderful. And you put together a summary of the finance committee meetings, and they're very succinct. But I would like to tell my fellow board members that that summary is very succinct, but all the backup documentation that Dwayne and I get is tremendous. So I do want to say thank you to that.
Thank you.
But when I do the calculation, when you said, a lot of that is due to Fund 60, you made reference to this in the detailed notes, and 870,000 reduction in Fund 90, which is Health, Life, Safety. When you back all that out, I still see that you reduced our expenditures by about 456,000.
Right. What I did was I went through and I right-sized different line items. For example, when I built the budget, the ancillaries were still, the union contract hadn't been decided, so all those ancillary benefits still had to be built into the budget.
Right.
And then we were successful in union negotiations of doing away
Right.
with those. And so it just made sense if I was going to amend the budget to go through and kind of analyze the really high lines that were out of whack,
Right.
the really low lines that were out of whack, and right
Right,
size.
and I guess that's the second comment I would like to make, and that is, for once, we have an amended budget, which is exactly what we should have all along. I know it's not required by ISB and ROE, it should be, because what it says is exactly what you determined, that you fine-tune these numbers so that the next year's budget is going to be even tighter and more fine-tuned. So, thank you.
That's my hope.
Well, no, it will be.
Well, I have to piggyback on, because it isn't just negotiations. There were some contracts that had gotten way bloated, that you've done a wonderful job going through contract by contract.
Well, and I had a lot of help. I had Jim
Okay.
and Mike helping
Right.
go through those contracts, and Josh with the copiers. I mean, we've worked really hard to look at all those contracts and where can we save money.
And it worked.
Yeah, and we have, and I appreciate you saying that, Charlotte. I mean, we've had several discussions about ways to make it a more efficient budget, and absolutely, directors, but really the principals as well
Right.
have, looked at ways in which to reduce expenditure and still maintain quality, to take a deeper look. Our teachers have done that, because I know they work with their teachers, and their teachers have given recommendations, and staff, so it really has been a group effort. So absolutely, with your leadership and with the team effort, people have done a great job, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all. It's not easy.
Okay, if there's no more questions, we need to approve the FY17 amended budget as presented. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Thank you.
Can we, yeah.
Wait. Stop.
What?
No,
Okay, go ahead. Who moved? You went now.
no, I was gonna ask Doug, pass it down. You wanna start with Brandon?
We got to approve it first,
Okay.
then you can sign it. Is that what you're?
I'll make that motion to approve the amended budget. Second.
Did you get that, Betsy?
Yep, I got it.
All right.
Okay. Dury Rush, Maddox,
Yep.
Siren,
Yes.
Worley,
Yes.
Yurevich,
Yes.
Brewer,
Yes.
and Con.
Yes. Charlotte, thank you. 7.3 line of credit results. You got some bids on borrowing some money?
I did, and I think that it's interesting that the last bid went to Bank of Springfield at 1.32. I think their 3%, which it's 3% currently, but the bid they gave is the national prime rate minus 1%, which makes their bid at 3%, but it was going to change every year depending on what the national prime was. I think they were signaling to me that, okay, we've had you now for a while at 1.32, we need to go make some money, and I don't think they wanted to give us any more money at those low rates. So Illinois National Bank is my recommendation that we accept their bid at 1.85%. And I don't think we're going to need to borrow $4 million, but I kept it at $4 million because it's the state of Illinois. I don't know what's going to happen in December and January. We might want to tap that, I don't.
Any questions? Do I have a motion then to approve the resolution regarding the line of credit to approve the lowest bid as presented to Illinois National Bank?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Betsy, please.
Yep, Maddox.
Yep.
Siren,
Yes.
Worley,
Yes.
Yurevich,
Yes.
Brewer,
Yes.
Dury Rush,
Yes.
and Con.
Yeah, I didn't need to read this resolution, did I?
Doesn't hurt.
Do you have to? Do we say move this presented?
Do I need to read this resolution, Charlotte?
I don't think so because of that court case. 186 court case. I don't think you have to do that.
Okay, we'll go with what Susan says.
That's what the court said.
students. Yeah, it's public, it's up there, so.
If we get sued, it's Susan's fault.
Make sure it's ready, Nancy, flash it up on the screen. Okay, that's good.
He's
I flashed
taping
it on the
us,
screen.
although it's not on me. It's Susan's fault.
You all heard me say that, right?
No.
Yeah, I'm good to go. It's a recent court case.
Okay. Charlotte, again, it looks like we got you on 7-4, resolution for payment of interfund loan.
Correct.
There's a resolution on that too. Do I need to read it?
No.
So moved as presented, if we need.
Any questions?
Just to clarify, this is going back,
Repay.
repay. Okay.
Took it out of the ed fund, used it in working cash, now working cash is gonna pay ed fund back.
We took it out of working cash.
We did.
Okay. to
So we're
the
just
SBA.
paying working cash back.
Okay, perfect.
Second.
That's it.
Yep. Sarah?
Yes.
Orley?
Yes.
Yurevich?
Yes.
Brewer?
Yes.
DeRuyaro?
Yes.
Maddox? Yes. And Conklin?
Yes. Charlotte, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on, old business, we've got some mechanical supply bids that you got some numbers
Good
for us.
evening. I do.
Jim, welcome.
I had supplied you guys with a bid tab for the mechanical supplies. And as I always do, I was preparing for the board meeting this evening and realized it was last year's bid tab that you had in your original board packet. So I've supplied you with the new numbers. And as I always do, I highlight what the low bid is, and I was doing this around 4 o'clock this afternoon. So I would like to recommend that we select the low bidder for each item. I believe it's the highlighted item, but if there's an error, I don't believe that there is, but if there's an error, I would just like to recommend that we take the low bid in each category for each particular item. The highlight is to help you guys identify which one it is, but if
So,
there's an...
is the corrected version, will the corrected version be on board docs tomorrow, maybe?
It is on there now, I believe.
Okay, okay.
It is on there now.
Okay, that's good.
But it was just supplied this afternoon, so yeah, I know you didn't have a chance to look at it, and I apologize for that, but as I always do, I always go through and try to bring last year's information in case there's questions, and noticed that there 3 or 4 of them were alike, so I started checking them and realized that it was actually last year's bid tab. But what I would recommend is these are all the bidders that we had. The ones that are highlighted in yellow are the low bid. We select the vendor based on the low price for all of the different items, so we don't just award it to one particular vendor. And all the vendors know that. Bids are good for a year, so we do this again next year. So that would be my recommendation.
So you pull that off when everything else we bid around here, we have to pick one of the 3 lines.
You know, we didn't used to do bids, and because there are so many items, a lot of the vendors...
Oh, they don't have them.
They don't carry them, or they have to go out to a middleman, if you will, to get the product. So there's some additional profit tacked on there. So they know that they're not in the market, and generally we're only buying certain items from them anyway. So really, in this market, it's not that uncommon to do what we do with this.
I have a question. It's always good to go for the lowest bid.
Yes.
But how about the quality? For example, if you see headlights, it is 7.80 from first column and 7.38 and 7.98. So if you go for the lowest bidder, how about the quality of that product?
Because we have a very, in the interest of space, this sheet is actually about 3 more columns wide. We have a very detailed specification. We do allow them to offer an alternate. For example, if we're looking for a filter for a Bluebird bus, we're looking for a very specific filter. Some vendors offer a knockoff of that. We don't typically use those. So we have a very specific specification that we put out.
Yeah,
So
that
we
makes sense.
know up
You know,
front
okay.
what we're getting.
Yeah.
But we know not everybody can sell us a Bluebird part or a Freightliner part, so we do allow them to offer an alternative, and there are cases where that makes sense. Brake pads and some different things where we might opt to do that.
You're pretty familiar with those products anyway, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the mechanics are way familiar with them, and I feed off of them. In fact, they look at this list every year, and we've added about 5 or 6 items this year that we were finding that we were continually using, so we added some more elements to it this year, and we continue to grow that list every year as it makes sense to do that. And we take some things off that we don't use anymore or that we're not carrying.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Jim? Good. Do I have a motion then to approve, what do we approve?
Already moved.
Yeah.
I'll second.
I'd move, but you're 100% for the night.
I'm not.
No, he's not.
Your Ravens is on it, man.
Greg got it.
It's good. Are you gonna actually say what the motion is, Brandon?
It's a motion that we
I said
approve the
Oh,
highlighted yellow
okay.
presented in attachment below. The corrected one be awarded to the vendor identified at the top of their respective columns.
And I'll second that, Steve.
Very good.
Yes, Worley.
Yes.
Urevich.
Yes.
Brewer.
Yes.
Urevich.
Yes.
Bannick.
Yes.
Searing.
Yes.
Cop.
Yes. Jim, thanks.
You're welcome.
You're up again.
Yes, sir.
New business 9-1.
We're talking about buses. This is sort of an interesting approach. This is we had put out an RFP for the purchase or lease, actually for the lease of 8 buses. We went back and looked. I have to say first, I'm not in, I don't know that I ever will be a fan of leasing buses as a long-term solution for our district. I don't know that it always makes a lot of sense. But as Charlotte and I had been working on budget numbers, trying to find out what was available to us and how to best meet our needs, we have some significant bus needs. You guys have heard that for the last several years in my January meeting. Going into this, Charlotte and I talked about having somewhere between $80,000 and $200,000. The need right now is a large number of buses. Between 5 and 8 buses is the real need. So with that in mind, I gathered the information. I put out an RFP to all of our vendors and just go through. I'm not going to highlight everything. Basic goal was to obtain as many buses as I possibly could with $80,000 to $200,000. That was sort of the goal, and to figure out what was the best way to do it financially for the district. Talking about our traditional method of purchasing buses, we were looking at buses that were 2 years old. Sort of what was magic about that was they all carry a 5-year warranty on them. So I got the oldest buses I could that I could still maintain a 3-year warranty on them. The buses that we're actually getting rid of, trying to figure out what that value would be. It's around $35,000 per bus. If we purchase 8 buses over 3 years, we'd have to buy them 3, 3, and 2. And when we do that in the claim, any trade value that we get reduces the market value, and you'll see later, reducing the market value means it goes on the depreciation schedule at a lesser value, so we get even less money back from the state. So I'm going to show you this in some slides. It'll probably be easier. This is just a lot of the verbiage, but if you'll scroll down to the lease assumptions, and we can, under the lease option, go 3-year lease, get 8 buses day one, the market value on those buses is $68,000. Same trade values on the buses. When we do a claim and you do a lease, when we file our claim with the state, the market value doesn't diminish the market value on the bus. The buses that we get rid of are actually a sale, so you have to claim that as revenue year one, but it doesn't have any long-term effect on that bus, on the depreciation schedule. Just go ahead.
3,500 per bus or 35,000?
It's about 3,500 per bus for the trade buses that we're getting rid of. Most are around the 2002, 2003. So they're 15, 16 years old. Go ahead and scroll down to that first graph, please. Lease payments, we got 8 buses. Yes, sir.
When you lease the buses, are you leasing new buses? Or
2-year-old. 2-year-old buses.
Okay, that's fine.
Whether we purchased or leased, they were all considered on 2-year-old buses.
Okay, so that's what you're saying.
Under the lease program, $79,000 a year for the lease payments. And first year, that lease payment is reduced by what we get and what we sell the 8 buses is $28,000. Is the high bid that we got was $28,000, $28,500 I think for. So we make our $79,000 lease payment. We deduct the $28,000 from that. Our out-of-pocket capital is $50,000 to lease buses. If we purchase 3 buses, take the trades for the 3 buses, our out-of-pocket expense is $195,000. Plus, we only have 3 buses, whereas if we lease them, we have 8. Year 2, basically the same scenario. You have $195,000 capital outlay. If you buy 3 more buses, now we have 6, versus another $79,000 lease payment. Year 3, we only buy 2 buses, so you've got $130,000 outlay versus $79,000. Okay, just out-of-pocket expenses, lease looks more financially viable. Plus, I have all the buses day one. I don't have to accumulate them over 3 years. Betsy, would you go to the next one?
Wait, before you do that.
Yep.
Why does it go up?
Why does what go up?
The lease amount.
Well, the first year, the lease payment is $79,000 each year. Year 1, we sell 8 buses that the lease buses are replacing.
Oh, so you got the.
So we take the revenue
Okay.
to reduce the lease payment.
Okay, sorry, I missed that if you said
Okay.
it. Sorry.
In comparing the purchase versus the lease, all the depreciation, whether it's the lease payment that goes on the depreciation schedule or the market value of the bus, the claim requires us to take the lease payment or the depreciation value, whichever is less. Lease payment is always smaller than what the market depreciation would be. So no matter what version we do, it's going to be subject to the same proration by the state.
But, okay, so one question I have is, if you said if the lease payment, so would the lease payment be lower than the depreciation on, well, I guess it depends. Is it straight line depreciation?
No, when you lease buses, you either take 20% of the market value or the lease payment, whichever is less.
Okay.
And
They get the buses back.
Okay.
It's almost always the lease payment is less than the 20% of the market value.
Okay.
And there's information in that chart. I just
Right.
wasn't going to go through all of it. You have the information. It's there, but I was going to show you on some charts how it works. The upside to the purchase is year 1 we purchase 3 buses. We get some depreciation. Year 2, we not only have year 1 depreciation, but we also have year 2. So it's going to continue to accumulate for each of the 3 years. And I will show you that in a chart here in just a second. Under the lease program, the lease depreciation that goes on the schedule will be highest the first year. We don't get to claim the interest. All right, there's always interest on a lease. If you'll go to the next slide, Betsy.
You don't get to claim the interest?
In a lease scenario, you will not get to claim the interest.
Okay.
So, purchase versus lease. Year one, the depreciation on 3 buses would be $39,068. Under the lease program, we would be entitled to claim the $79,000 year one. That's our payment. Okay? Revenue of the buses that we sell are going to show up in the claim in a different line item, so it'll reduce that, but we'll actually get to claim the $79,000 because year one, there's no interest. You make that first payment the day you get the buses, there's no interest, so you claim the full amount. Year two, you see how the depreciation has on the blue box, how the depreciation has doubled. Basically, that's year two. We've got the $39,000 from year one plus the $39,000 from year two.
Are there any mileage restrictions that might be a hindrance?
They have a 12,000 mile limitation. It will not be a hindrance.
So we don't drive anywhere near?
We have, in fact, we went through as looking how I was going to do that. At least a third of our buses, of the 56 buses that we have, at least a third of them travel less than 9,000 miles annually. We have some that do 15, some that do 18, but at least a third of them travel less than 9,000 miles a year. So those are the buses that we would be looking at moving around and using for lease buses. And then year three, you see where that purchase depreciation is $100,000. That's after we've accumulated all 3 buses. At the end of the third year, it'd be $104,000. You see the lease claim in year 2 would be around $64,000. In year 3, it would be $66,000 because the interest would be a little less. Yes, sir.
Now, after 3 years, when the lease expires, would you look to purchase those or to replace them with 8 more?
My long-term plan, and Charlotte and I have talked about this, we don't know what's going to happen. The lease method will actually provide us with some savings over 3 years. I'm trying to talk her into continuing to fund with those savings so that at the end of year 3, we have some money there that we can purchase 3 buses. And there may be some concern about, gosh, if we sell 8 buses at the end of 3 years, we give 8 back, are we going to be short? And the answer is no. We've been responsible. We've been managing our fleet as we've been able to reduce routes. We haven't had a lot of opportunities to just sell them outright. We usually do that as a trade. So we've got buses that we use for spares. But at the end of 3 years, hopefully, the plan would be to buy 3. And if we needed to continue to lease, say, 4 more buses, it's no more, it would be actually less than what we would be spending now leasing 8.
And you mean not 4 more, 4 of the original 8 that were leased to begin with. So it wouldn't be leasing 12, I just want to clarify that.
Oh, correct. No, we'd have 8, we'd give the 8 back.
Right.
Lease 4, buy 3. Worst case scenario, we did that for 3 more years. And if we needed them, we bought 3.
We talked about it. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, thank you for clarification.
So when you lease these buses, is there a maintenance program that comes with them, or do you maintain those buses?
They're under warranty. They're under full warranty, which is why 2 years is an ideal number. All those buses carry a 5-year, pretty much bumper-to-bumper warranty. I mean, we wear brakes out, we're gonna have to put brakes on them, we manage the lights and those kinds of things, but
So you do the routine maintenance? not
Exactly.
The big items?
exactly. So the magic number with 2 is that's the oldest bus we could get, keep them for 3 years or under full manufacturer's warranties. We don't have any mechanical issues. We do minor maintenance. We get rid of 8 buses that we're spending a large percentage of our dollars, maintenance dollars, maintaining those older buses.
Do you have any idea, like the 10-year-old bus that we own, how much we're spending on maintenance on it versus how much we're going to save on the 3-year lease bus? And factoring that into this overall cost perspective?
I don't know dollar for dollar, but I can assure you it's significant.
Right.
And I did not factor any of that sort of unknown number in there. And I sort of did it intentionally because I didn't have the exact number, and I didn't want to speculate that it would be this amount or that amount, but I can assure you it's significant. And that'll be additional savings that I haven't even convinced Charlotte to reduce the budget because of that, because I mean it'll be substantial.
I think the concern is just that after 3 years, the reason like Illinois has gotten into trouble, I think the new term is kick the can down the road. And I just did some quick math. After the 3 years, assuming the buses last 15, which we got some that are older than that, that last 12 years, they would only cost us $25,000 a year if we purchased them versus this is gonna basically stick at, what was it, 79,000 for leasing.
For leasing 8 buses, 79,000 for 8 buses, yeah.
So I missed the transportation meeting, so I apologize, and I hadn't seen this. I'm just trying to process.
No, I understand.
But within 6 years, owning buses would rapidly pay for itself, it appears, from my calculations. The question is, do we have the money to buy them now, I think is what you're getting at.
Well, and I think the answer is no. And to buy 8 buses today is $700,000-800,000, and that's part of the issue. And I mean we have an immediate need, and it's a significant need. I said at the outset, I'm not a lease guy. I've never been a lease guy, but I'm trying to look at the financial aspect of it. And Charlotte and I talked very much about kicking the can down the road, and we don't know what's going to happen, but utilizing committing to $80,000 a year versus $200 seems to be a good financial decision today. And I think at the end of year 3, I have a plan. We wouldn't have any trades to buy 3 buses. Okay? You buy 3 buses at $85,000, it's $255,000.
But if we have a significant need for 8 now, in 3 years, why would we only need 3, I guess is what I'm trying to.
Because if we lease 4 and buy 3, I still have 7.
Oh, so we're still going to be paying out
$39,000.
So you're
half as
always,
many.
I was confused initially too. So for the first set of 3 years, it's 8. Then for the second set of 3 years, you would lease 8 buses. Then for the second set of 3 years, you would buy a portion and lease a portion, correct?
That would be worst case scenario. Yes, I mean if we still have a need. I mean, I don't know what the need. I mean, our district's growing. I know that, but I don't know what's going to happen. We may find. I'm going to probably. But if we change school times, we may gain yet some additional efficiencies and not need to replace all 8. We may only need to replace 5. So I don't know what 3 years is going to bring, but in my mind, worst case scenario is we buy 3 for $255,000, we lease 4 for $39,000, and that's less money than what we've saved in the first 3 years. The first 3 year savings is $312,000. So between the two numbers, if we save $300,000, and that, to me, that's the hard number. That doesn't even count the maintenance money. Okay, so if we have some of those savings, at the end of 3 years, we've already paid for buying 3 buses in the first year's lease, not counting any additional savings we might have going through the lease program with those 4 buses again, just like I'm showing you here.
But you don't have.
But you don't get the asset. You don't get the asset. It's just, I guess that's.
But you're going to turn it over anyway. I mean, you're wanting to keep the bus that you wanted to originally, like a 10-year turnaround, right? Keep a bus 10 years and
Yes.
and trade it.
That would be the plan. That was the
At this
long-term
lease
plan.
rate and buying a bus at $68,000, and that's a 2-year-old bus, not a new one. That's about 7 years of what the purchase price would have been. So you're roughly at lease rate getting close to where you would have been buying this 2-year-old bus and trying to trade it in 10. You know what I mean? You don't have the asset, but you're going to turn around and buy new ones because the old one's bad and the trade-in value is crap.
I had somebody who was a lot
The
smarter
trade-in
than me
value
and
is
said,
$68,000.
what's the,
And you wouldn't have that.
No, the trade-in value, you're getting $3,500 for these buses. Your $70,000 bus is going to get you 3 when
But
you
what
Oh,
go to
she's
trade.
saying is that after 3 years, we wouldn't have the $80,000 bus or whatever it's worth. It's gone. It just disappears on a lease.
Correct. But
I'm
I'm looking at it from a cash flow perspective,
Sure.
which
Yeah,
is what
right.
you're.
That's where
Exactly.
he's coming
Yeah.
from.
one of the things that we've had a lot of discussion about, I don't know that there's any benefit to us owning that asset.
Right, it's not like a house, it doesn't appreciate.
I mean, and there was somebody a lot smarter than me said, what's the allure to owning the asset? I couldn't come up with an answer, so I felt like they were smarter than I was.
Well,
So-
in the reality, I remember in the 80s,
Yep.
the combine manufacturers had this big lease thing. Roll your combine every year. It's so cheap you can't afford not to. Well,
Right.
times hit and they said, sorry, you owe me $200,000.
Right,
Forgot to tell you that.
yeah,
I know that's oversimplified, but yes, it can get you in deep trouble.
Absolutely.
I'm trying to process here. So
I'm not a lease guy. I'm not.
Tough times come for bus companies.
Yeah, I'm not a lease guy, and that's why I sort of went into this thinking, I need to prove that we need to buy buses,
So.
and I couldn't prove that.
So the answer to why do we want to own the buses, so that they're ours, so that when we need them, we've got them, I guess.
Well, the lease buses are ours. They're ours. They can't come and get them. They're ours. We make the payment.
You
They
can go
can't
trade
come
them
and get them.
tomorrow.
For the period of lease, and then after that,
We will always have the option to buy them. I mean, we'll always have the option to buy them at the end of the lease.
so at the end of the day, did we have any net more buses than we started with?
No. Lease 8, sell 8.
Okay. Was the original RFP for 8?
Yes.
Oh, we have
And
a better, safer fleet.
Well,
Well, that's one of the things that we talked about, Jim, was the escalation in repair costs that is getting to be greater and greater.
In fact,
So this would be an opportunity to try leasing on a percentage of our buses and see how it works out.
on a very limited basis with the long-term solution to get out of it.
Why did
Because
you
that's not my, I don't think that's a long-term solution.
Why did you choose 8 instead of 4? Why did you
Because-
choose 8?
Because I have 3 buses that we can't even operate today.
Okay, that makes 3. What about the other 5?
They're 2001s. We've got buses that are 16 years old. And the magic the magic to 8 was getting 2-year-old buses put us right around that
Okay.
maximum number that Charlotte originally told me was $80,000. She said, you have $80,000, and I said, all right, what can I get for $80,000?
Okay.
That's the truth.
You said up to 100, you stated 80.
Well, originally she said 80, then she came back and said, well, I might have up to 200. So that's where the two numbers came from. That was my thresholds of what can I get for 80 and what can I get for 200.
What's a new bus cost? Just
$85,000.
about 80, 85?
85, without air conditioning. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just
Talk
kidding.
about air conditioning.
Like they have in the combines.
I don't know the right answer, and the blended idea is probably a good way to find the sweet spot in both ideas. But what is, Dwayne, I'm still not following the concern of how you can get that deep in a lease situation. I mean, the worst situation is we get to the end of the lease and now we have to buy a bus.
Yes. So I'm looking long-term. On the 10-year plan, it's cheaper to own your own. Significantly cheaper, about to the tune of about 50 grand a year. So there's always, on a lease, there's always a middleman and you gotta pay him.
But I'm not following that. I'm not following that math.
Well, I can.
We'll talk about it later.
What can happen is if you start rolling, you've always got a residual value. So if I lease a bus, at the end, they are always calculating what's that vehicle, bus, combine, what's it going to be worth at the end. And if you roll into another one, okay, they have to be able to deal with that residual. Well, if that residual is more than what you anticipated, they can come back to you for the residual. That's part of the problem. They can. Depends on how they write that.
Plus, if they can get your whole fleet long-term.
We're not there with the buses.
Selling you higher-priced buses, and pretty soon, and then your whole fleet's leased, and they stick you with the high-priced bus. Now we're in big trouble.
Yeah, and we're not. I'm never going to be a lease guy. I'm trying to fix a short-term problem with a short-term solution.
Right, but they're taking into consideration that at the end of our 3-year lease, them buses will no longer have any warranty.
Correct. And that's why
they've got to factor.
And
that's why I don't want
the buses we buy, because the leased buses purchase price at the end of the lease is higher than what it should be negotiable with. So that's not the bus you would buy if you bought one. You would buy a different bus. So
what they do is your lease payments are paying down from that market value.
Right.
So they calculate in, we think the bus is going to be worth $30,000 at the end. You pay 3 years, that's going to leave a market value of this, and you can buy it for that at the end of the lease.
Right, which is
not what we want to do.
No, that's no. But at the end of the lease, you just turn it in. So residual has nothing to do with it.
I guess the reason I'm just asking.
Yeah.
The reason I'm pushing back a little bit is if I could see something like, hey, Illinois just passed a budget, or there's unicorns and rainbows, but
we'd be buying buses.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm telling you, I would be recommending we buy buses.
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
The state of Illinois owes us $459,000 today for transportation. If the state was paying us, we wouldn't be having this conversation because he would be buying the 5 buses he was approved for in January. So we had to look at other options to get safe buses on the streets for the kids, and leasing helps us in that short term. But it's only short term. Jim or I, neither one want to continue leasing buses. Our goal is to own our own buses.
And I think that's best. I think that's what's best for the district, long term.
So we're bridging until the state of Illinois passes a budget?
No.
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 We don't have that.
No.
We wouldn't have that conversation if they passed a budget.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Is, with the terms of a 3-year lease
I
in the
accept
land
that,
of
yes.
unicorns and rainbows.
Okay.
We're hoping that the state of Illinois has a budget sometime before the end of that 3-year term. At that point, they'd pay us what we owed, hopefully. We'd get rid of the leases, and we'd be back to purchasing assets.
So I think that is, that would be wonderful, if the state were to do that. But we need to be more self-sufficient. And part of our, I'm not going to become reliant upon the state, quite frankly. What we need to do is look at how we can best manage our own dollars. And by leasing a bus, we're in a situation, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we've had several discussions about this. We do have a fleet. We have a fleet that covers our routes, and then we have a few extra fleet buses for extra trips in case one breaks down, whatever the case might be. So not only are we going to get new buses for the safety of our students, but it's also going to reduce the amount of miles that go on these older buses that we're going to be able to use. I mean, we weighed a lot of different things, because one of the things that was most convincing to me as we were talking was the increased costs we're seeing in repairs, and it just, mechanical, hours that our employees are putting into it. So for this, no, we've said all along, our goal isn't to get into leasing. This is the best case scenario, because we also, what coincides with this is increasing and improving our fund balance in transportation. But ultimately, we want to own those buses.
And I think at the end of the day, the savings, again, the information's in here, but $312,000 over the 3 years, leasing versus buying, and there's a lot of factors. Our net out-of-pocket expense, if you go to the very last,
Short term.
I think the very last graph, right, one more. Our actual out-of-pocket expense year one. Now, there's some language in here explains, part of the claim process, we know there's some inherent losses when we put anything on the depreciation schedule. They take 20% off the top, and then they prorate it. Notwithstanding that, because no matter what we put on there, the same thing is going to happen. But our net out-of-pocket expense means our capital outlay, less whatever trades or sales we have, less whatever money we can claim. In year one, it's zero. Because everything we do year one, our lease payment is 100% because there's no interest. The sale money, and then we claim the balance, the difference. So year one, other than what the state's going to take as part of the claim, out-of-pocket expense year one is zero. Year two is only the interest of $14,000. Year three is $12,000. That's out-of-pocket expense at the end of the day. We buy buses, it's $156,000, $117,000, and $25,000 year three.
So, I like the numbers, of course, from a cash flow standpoint, but in the back of my head, I'm saying, oh, really? You think our financial position is going to have improved so much in 3 years that we can convert lease buses to purchase buses?
If we can keep, what is that, 260,000, 270,000 just in 2 years out-of-pocket expense, when you've got 273 versus 14, that's real money. That's money that's going to stay in our pocket.
Okay, so basically, this question is also addressed to Charlotte. Okay, if we lease, 8 buses or whatever, and we save the cash flow, really, that cash flow savings cannot be directed to any other fund that may be shortened. It has to go and stay in the transportation fund. Is that like
I agree.
Charlotte? Is that like Charlotte?
No, that's totally my goal. Right now, we're putting $100,000 of general state aid into transportation, and all of the CPPRT that we get. 100% of that goes in. So we've already started giving him $300,000 more than what he had in previous years because of all those years where we saw it declining, and so we're slowly trying to build that back up.
So you feel comfortable that, that's an unfair way to say it. Given the state of, big question mark of Illinois, my concern becomes, okay, there is some cash flow savings here, and you know, your intent is to put it in the transportation fund to build up the fund reserves. But the education fund, we might be short just due to humongous growth. I mean, we have to have teachers. So I just see this, it sounds good, but I mean, the intent of cash flow savings, I understand. But my concern would be that it ultimately could not be protected in the transportation fund if our education fund, if we don't have teachers to hire, if we don't have money to hire teachers. I mean, isn't this all interrelated, really?
I would just offer worst case, we only have $25,000 or $30,000 out of pocket over 3 years. We get to the end of year 3, you say, hey, we can't give you that money that you saved, that cash flow savings. It has to go elsewhere. We're no worse off than we are today, except we could roll those 8 buses and do the exact same thing and continue to generate that cash flow savings. If we spend the money today, we don't have an option. We don't have an option to do that 3 years from now.
I think the concern is, though, 3 years from now, there may be a greater need than just 8 buses. If those 8 leased buses go away 3 years down the road, you may have more buses that are out. And I think Dwayne's concern is, well, what if at that point we go, well, now we need 12 to lease? You know, unless I misunderstood you.
No, I think that's an absolute perfect question. I don't know what's going to happen
But
down the road.
at this moment in time, right now, based on that budget, we either lease 8 or buy 3, correct?
That's essentially what it
Yes.
comes down to.
By 3, 3, and 2.
Right, but in terms of your need for next year,
Correct.
so on, today, so when school starts in August, we either have 8 new leased buses or 3 new buses, each of which are 2 years old.
All of them, no matter what we do, they'll be 2-year-old buses.
Right, so we either have 3 that we're own or 8 that we've leased for this August.
And Brandon, right there's my math, that 25,000, remember the lease was 79? After year 3, that's the savings, the 50 grand.
I'd like to point out one thing.
That's our long-term savings, not short-term.
The 80,000 that I originally gave Jim, that's a real number. Up to $200,000 was contingent on the state of Illinois paying us one of the categoricals. You know, because there for a while it was looking like we could get some categoricals by the end of the year. We did not get any categoricals. And so he would be looking at 80,000. I'd find another 5 and he could get 1 bus.
So now it's either, in August, we have 8 leased buses or 1 bus that we own. And if I'm hearing you correct, 1 bus doesn't cover our need.
Does not.
No.
Does not.
So,
I've got 2 buses that we can't run today. They're mechanical failures. And we've run buses to failure because of it. We don't have any options.
The last thing you want is to not pick up kids on the first day of school.
Kids will be happy.
I have a question to ask you, and it's related to the purchase of the buses, but it may tangentially anyways. We got a one-time amount of money for having our TIF property rolled off, correct?
Mm-hmm.
It was,
$132,000.
okay, $132,000. That's a one-time roll-off.
That was back money they owed us though, wasn't it?
What that amounted to was because they didn't extend the TIF, they allowed the TIF district to expire.
Right.
Well, they had all this money sitting in the bank to use for promoting it that they didn't distribute to any businesses. And so what they did was they went back to the taxing bodies and gave us the rebate of the balance of what was in the bank.
Right, and that's $132,000, that's a one-time shot. That should not go into fund daily, it should not be included in the operations budget for next year. It's a one-time shot.
We're cash basis, and so that went into the ed fund.
Okay.
And I mean, and as you saw from my amended budget, we're going to have a surplus. Well, I shouldn't say surplus.
Less of a deficit.
Forget that, scratch that word. Less of a deficit. And that 132,000 helped decrease that deficit
Okay,
in the ed fund.
But my suggestion for consideration is that the tip, I mean, I can see where you put it in the education fund, but I could make a equally strong argument that it should go into the transportation fund. I could say, basically, the TIF monies were from a long-term, initiation of TIF properties. We got lucky. It's a one-time deal. Why did you choose the education fund? Why don't you choose the transportation fund? And then we say, okay, you're right. I can't say why the education fund is more important than the transportation fund. So
the ed fund got it because that's the fund that's running the greatest deficit.
You're proposing that we take that plus the 80 and get the 3 new buses and move on? Is that what I heard?
Well,
That is a really
the reality of it is, I know the education fund has the greatest deficit, but of course, because proportionately, the education fund to the transportation fund, of course that makes sense. Pro rata, Charlotte, pro rata, I mean, we'd have to look at the percentages.
I wish we could bring up the slide from my budget presentation that showed each of the funds and what they were spending in early taxes. Transportation spends the least amount in early taxes.
Yeah.
And by least, I mean, I don't know that you dip into it by $100,000. I mean, I wish I had that slide in front of me right now, and I don't have it committed to memory. I just know that they are the like, and this is just an estimate, but let's say ed fund spent $5 million of early tax dollars, and the operations and maintenance spent $2 million in early tax dollars, and Jim spent under $1 million. I mean, it was under 500,000 if I'm remembering it right. It was very, so that's why the decision was made.
Mm-hmm. No, I understand.
Anybody else got any questions about leasing versus owning on this?
I have just curious.
Okay.
Can you find any dealers giving 0% APR for 10 years, 15 years?
The state doesn't allow it.
Oh, okay.
Because I did that in 2002 and made a rule against it, so we can't do that anymore. Whether it's leasing or purchasing or anything, they won't allow you to have any 0% interest, even if you paid up front.
Well, because it's government money, some of it.
They out-funk us on that one.
Anybody got any more questions for Jim?
If you, Betsy, if you'd go to that other attachment, this is the information that we got from the RFP. One vendor just didn't have any 2-year-old buses that met our specifications. Midwest Transit was $79,000. Interest rate was 3.1%. The trade values were $28,300 for our buses. Central States, which is the Bluebird dealer, their lease payment was $86,000 a year. Interest rate was 4.7. Trade values were $15,250. So it would be my recommendation that we lease 8 buses and that we do so with Midwest Transit.
So moved.
Thank you, sir.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Betsy, please.
Yep. Yurevich,
Yes.
Brewer,
Yes.
Uraraj,
Yes.
Maddox,
Yes.
Zarin,
Yes.
Worley,
Yes.
and Cotton.
Yes. Jim, Charlotte, I want to congratulate or at least thank you guys for looking outside the box at some other options. I know we've talked leasing, owning over the past several years, multiple times. I don't know if it's going to work, you don't know if it's going to work, but at least you're going to try it on a small percentage, and we're going to know at the end of 3 years whether or not it was a good thing or not. So, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Moving on to 9.2, WSCC radio tower. You want to give the
Me?
intro to this? You want me to do it? I'll start. And okay, I don't know if any of you are aware, there's a tower on our property. It's over behind the high school. It's tied in with a building that's also on our property over by the high school. It's called WSCC. We own the property. We don't own the building. We don't own the tower. They were both put in after the high school was built in roughly 2000, 2001, if I believe.
1 or 2, yeah.
There's a contract in place for them that ties us with WSCC. WSCC has the authority to do what they want with the tower and the building, but we get the option to step in and decide whether we want to buy it before somebody else does. Well, they've decided to sell the tower, and we have to decide whether or not we want to own it or we want to let somebody else buy it. So there's probably some of you that weren't even aware that we had this going on. But it's been something that's been in our background, that's just been sitting there, and it's up front and then right in front of us right now. We've got to decide whether or not we want to let it go or not.
No, it's
Or we wanna own it.
discussion only tonight.
Yeah, it's discussed.
Correct.
Okay.
But to that, we have to weigh out the pros and cons, and then we're going to have some opportunities to.
Well, there's a 30-day clock that started ticking on the day that we were notified, which was June 13th. And then on June 15th, they sent us the formal agreement to purchase from K2 Towers, or Tower K2. And it states that they would give them $242,000 for that tower. They're buying 3 others, so it's a group of 4 towers owned by WSEC. In the language, that offer is contingent on this board not exercising their right to purchase the 1 tower here for the $242,000.
And currently, we have 2.
We have two radios on there.
That's what I was gonna ask.
Okay. So there is some value right now currently to the district.
Yeah.
Is there any value to the district in owning that tower? We've never owned it in the past, but we still had use of it.
The biggest thing is if you can turn it into revenue and lease the space on the tower to somebody else. I think HS might be on there too. I know there's other companies on the tower, so that's how it usually works, is you rent or lease space on it. So.
Do we know if they currently, what they're currently leasing?
They have $25,000 a year in contracts.
Do we know if those contracts hold over to the new purchaser of the tower? Are those contracts null and void?
I do not, because we weren't able to see those contracts.
Fair enough. I was just curious if we already have baked in revenue generation if we become the owner of it.
It's a risk. The one thing we would want to make sure, which I believe it is in there, is if they sell it, we can remain on there. But that'd be one thing we want to make sure too, is remain under there. And I would say if we can, use the opportunity to better the situation or at least keep it the same. We get one, whenever the original contract was put in, we get 1 radio on there for free. They charge us right now for the second one. In my opinion, we need to figure out if we can get that.
These are the transmitters that carry our computer traffic, correct? The ones we
One's
talked about
pointed
earlier.
to this building, one's pointed to Chatham Elementary.
Is there a way to put those, isn't there a tower on the high school, or do we talk about putting one on there, or?
There's not right now.
There isn't now, but we talked about putting one there. How expensive would it be to put that on there so we can maintain our radios?
Probably not that cost. I'm guessing.
Not $242,000.
For what we need in all reality.
So the property that we own underneath the tower, that is part of this lease that I don't remember us signing, but apparently we did. I can't remember when this thing's dated 2015.
We did it January 26th, 2015 meeting.
But anyway, that says that we're leasing the land for $1 a year. But that doesn't carry over to a new owner of the tower, correct?
I would like to interject that I contacted our attorney, Rick Grinzenbach, and he indicated that agreement stands. We maintain all of our rights in it. The new company just merely steps into the shoes of WSEC. So when you read that contract, instead of reading WSEC all throughout it, you're going to be reading the new company. My only concern is that that contract only covers one dish for free on that tower. So the dish we're paying $250 a month for, the new company that buys this tower could increase every single one of those, including ours.
Where did Rick get that information that contract would go on?
It's written into the contract.
Yeah, it is.
Into our original?
It's written into the language of that,
Okay.
of that lease.
Where's that at?
Should
It was
somebody
handed out,
inquire it?
yeah.
And what was the length originally on the original lease?
5 years with, it's 5 years from February 1st, 2015 to February 1st, 2020. And you have the option to renew the lease for 2 additional periods of 5 years.
But I want to know where in here it says that if somebody else owns the facility, that this contract applies to them.
I thought was that in the document, the formal bid that they said that you don't? So I thought whenever you read that to me the other day, I thought it was, it kind of.
Well, that's a bid, that's not this contract.
Brandon, it's further back there. You have to keep flipping through it. It's towards the end. I don't think it's called first right of refusal,
Is that
but
assignment?
it lays out what happens if, for our first right of refusal.
Because when we did our wireless upgrade this spring break, we were gonna put an additional radio on there that goes to Ball Elementary, and they were gonna charge us for it, so we didn't end up putting it up there. We put it on transportation tower instead. So ideally, it would have been at the high school, but I just refused to pay
The frustrating part of it is,
something that's on our land already.
Right, so you made it work, we had other
Oh,
options.
yeah, it works, yeah. Yeah, we had other options, that's why I told you, I don't agree with paying for something that's on our land already.
Well,
the
and this-
frustrating part is the leasing part of it to where we should have control over.
Yeah.
At least the tower's not
Because
some
it requires our.
long, drawn-out lease like the building. The building is a very, very long lease, and it's $1 a year they pay us
Yeah, that's
for
what,
that building on our land.
that's what I was trying to get to.
Well, on the buses, I already maybe hinted that I like to own things rather than let them sit on my property. But at just quick math, 25,000 income divided by 242,000 is about 10% per income per year. And our interest would probably only be 3%, Ann says. But I'm just saying that it's almost makes business sense just to buy the darn thing. Not to mention, it's on our property, to Josh's point.
And I'm not disagreeing with you, that's assuming that the contracts in place remain in place when we own it.
Yes,
Well, look,
yes. To finish my point, it appears that we're going all wireless in this world. And I know, for instance, Royale's buying up towers all over God's creation, so I think 242 would be the baseline, and it would, because I know 15 years ago or so, they were only 100,000. Depends on the tower. But I'm just trying, where do we find this information, or can you get it for us?
I think we need to probably see 2 things. One is, I wonder if we can get a list of the clients that are on there, and like Bill's saying, do they stay? Are they locked in? And then another would be, what are we on the hook for as far as maintenance?
Yeah, that's a
Yeah, I don't
300-foot
know.
tower.
Do we own the land that the tower's on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we force them to take the tower down
I don't know.
because it's our land?
That could be in the.
Because that's a good negotiating point. Hey, we'll just make you take it down.
Yeah.
We can sell it to us cheap.
We're,
I mean,
We need
these are.
water.
Well, we obviously can't do that if they're telling us, which I don't understand this still, but if they're telling us that this lease applies to the new purchaser legally, then we wouldn't be able to tear the tower down.
No, we wouldn't tear it down. They would, because it's on our property. We need to know what the agreement was for them to put that tower on our property. There must be some legal document that spells out, what the agreement was.
That's the lease. That's what you're looking at. That's the only thing I have in my files.
So does this lease address,
Gotta probably cost.
yeah, we're gonna have to have a lawyer.
But if I understand right, the clock is ticking. They will sell it on July 13th.
As a matter of
in
fact-
absence of us acting.
As a matter of fact, they've already signed that agreement. And when I talked to the attorney saying, doesn't that breach our lease agreement if they are accepting that prior to us officially? And he said no. That him signing it was merely contingent on us not exercising our right.
And honestly, we'd probably want a signed agreement to know that our clock is ticking, right? I mean, otherwise they could just say,
That's why
yeah, I've
they
got a
provide
deal
that.
coming, you know?
We got it.
And I don't even know how it works, the tower's on, all that equipment takes electricity and everything else too.
It's also my understanding we're
So I
dealing
don't
with,
know, I mean, how does that work? If somebody
Are we
else
paying
owns
that
the tower
currently?
and they're paying the bills for that building, I don't know how that's gonna work. It goes down to the bottom of the tower and then it comes back into the building, I believe.
and they're dealing with the FCC on this too, right? So there's some federal regulations and
Yeah,
some
oh yeah.
stuff that we're gonna have to have the expertise, or we're gonna have to hire that
Yeah.
dealing talent.
Yeah, I'd say we have a lot of work to do, and there will be a special meeting, because the July general meeting will be too late.
Right. So I guess at this point, are you guys
With the attorneys yet?
comfortable knowing where
Yeah,
our
our big
thoughts are?
thing, our big thing was, you really had nothing to act on until they had someone that was interested.
Right.
For
Now we got-
transparency purposes, bring it before the board to talk about it, discuss. I know Josh had some things to share, talk about the contract, and then the next steps would be to talk about things such as the vendors that are currently on there, or the users, and to see how they transfer.
Which according to that contract, the contract would be maintained through the length of this lease. And when did you say that lease expired, Susan?
Well, February 2020.
So we would have that 25K of revenue annualized coming in at a minimum until February of 2020.
Right.
And
Well, I
it
don't know,
can
how would
be,
that work, because that's our lease. I'm sure
You know,
like
that's
if HSHS has got a lease, then theirs could be
Yeah.
ending.
next year.
That's true.
We're not getting the revenue
That's
now.
true.
No, we're not.
No,
So.
no, you don't know.
It'd be, how long are their leases good for?
I would like to point out, because that lease expires in 2020, we could let K2 buy the tower, and then in 2020, us raise that lease from $1 to something more.
Substantial.
Something outrageous.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we talked
Absolutely
about. That's what we
outrageous.
talked about.
Let's get
I mean, it
100 grand a year.
You can go back to what Greg said, is here it is, or else you
have to
need to
move.
get it down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, so
We
Because
you-
I don't know
check
how,
that out.
if we own the land, I don't know how they can tell us what they can put on it or not put on it.
So
Well, at the end of the day, we're gonna get some more guidance from our.
Yeah, I mean, we have to have Josh.
but ultimately, we need to decide, do we want it or not? And if not,
The
how can we
attorney.
use our land as leverage to
Right.
renegotiate some sort of a lease?
Right.
Yeah.
And we might as well, we get probably the first week in July, right? I mean, here it is already the 20 whatever, but
I'd like to point out, they have not gotten an offer on the building, but the same problem exists with the building, it's for sale. And so the minute they get an offer on the building, that 30-day clock starts ticking for this
Right.
board to decide if they want to exercise first
Because there's a
right of
for
refusal.
sale sign up out in front of it.
Do we own that land also?
Yes.
Yes, we do.
Well, that question needs to be.
Then how can they sell the building alone?
Yes, very interesting. The board, a long time ago, decided that they would get a program out of it for the students. And so they decided to let WSEC build on our land, and the trade-off was going to be they were going to create this fabulous communications program for students. That's not exactly what they did. They really haven't kept up their side of that agreement. But that's why the school district at the time entered into this
It was a
very...
cooperative agreement.
Yes.
So my question would be that, there may be some case law out there dealing with, like Brandon and I were talking about Lake Springfield. You can't own your lot there. You can build a house on the lake, but you do not own the property.
Right.
So there may be some case law that says what happens, if you decide, or the city decides, hey, we need this land, you need to go, how that works.
After 7 years, it may be in easement.
I think it's
I don't know.
100-year lease.
It'd also be interesting to see how much of that implication was in writing about the programs for our students. Because if those concessions were made with that agreement in mind and that was not accomplished, that also might fudge up some of the ties.
We definitely need to have a plan. We have 23 days by my count, right? So it sounds like lots of stuff has to happen.
Yeah, we need to get it figured out quick.
Or our lawyers could file an injunction to keep them from selling it until we get it figured out, too.
All of those things are easily answered, and we just wanted to bring it before the board for discussion to get your sense of direction. So now we have it, and we'll get those things answered.
Inundate us with information and facts, and then give us a few days to look at it, please.
Yep.
So who owns what piece moving forward? Who's doing what as far as gathering information?
The administration and Doug,
Yeah.
Dr. Wood.
We're done. Yep, we're done.
So we'll find out about the educational cooperation that existed as well as
Yeah,
the.
and I'll push that out to the whole board.
Okay. Bless you. Moving on, 9.3, we have a resolution for restrictions for competitive bidding related to technology. I believe this is that IASB resolution that we need to get approved before III.
Yes. And this one we've gone through several times, but I'll just, Ben Schwarm is with IASB, and he asks us for resolutions to be voted on in Chicago in November. So don't look at that quite yet. I'm going to read you. Him and I got together, and he told me what the process was, so I sent him an email with what I was thinking, and then he wrote me these 3 options that he could take to Chicago. So for your guys' benefit, here's the thinking. This is the email I wrote to him. Basically, the school code lists in section 10-20.21 rules for bidding contracts, and currently has multiple exceptions to the competitive bidding process, i.e. Roman numeral 7 below. The issue we have run into is that it seems school officials are interpreting this exception very broadly so that they don't have to bid a multitude of things. For instance, we recently got one quote for security cameras where we were told that the $265,000 project didn't need to be bid. I debated the subject in open session, and to cover my behind, I asked for an opinion from our lawyer. Amazingly enough, our lawyer used the example that HVAC equipment, so heating and cooling, doesn't need to be bid because it has wires that communicate with other units. Now, we're not saying he is wrong necessarily. What we are saying, though, is that if the exception is this broadly interpreted by school lawyers, with that logic, pretty soon school districts will be building $30 million no-bid school buildings because there are wires in the buildings that communicate with other buildings. Following the logic here? Yeah. Could the classrooms in Illinois be starving for cash partly because way too many dollars are going to no-bid contracts? We believe it's certainly possible and wish to propose a fix or fixes. So he sent me back, after he got that, these are the kind of the 3 options that he would recommend that we take to Chicago that could get voted on. And I just need feedback if you want to pick one as a board or if you want to write a new one. It has to be done by tomorrow, though. Tomorrow's the deadline. So the first one, just to help you, is encourage school boards to employ competitive bidding practices for upgrades in technology and energy savings contracts. So encourage means have meetings, train us at Chicago. That's probably the basic step that needs to start happening. The second one is initiate a study regarding the use of no-bid contracts for the purchase of technology and energy savings improvements. Okay, I don't know where study goes, but we'd be able to gather a lot of, or they would gather a lot of information. The third one is support legislation that clarifies the exception, blah, 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 regarding the equipment and such. When I spoke with him, we both agreed that option 3 is probably not one that I would, or we would recommend, because with the state of the state, there's nothing getting passed. And if you want to change the law, good luck. So that kind of takes out option 3. Yes, Greg?
The question I've got is, because this is part of the code, and the school code is what you're using to get this exception, if you don't legislatively change it and they write a policy, it's just a policy. You don't have to follow that policy. If it's not in the code, then it's not binding. There's no teeth.
So that's ultimately, to me, number 3 is a long-term, if the state would ever decide to agree on anything.
Well, the other thing to think about is, this is a proposal going to the delegate assembly for the Illinois Association of School Boards.
Right.
Which their only job is to help support us in the state in our functions. And the delegate assembly is going to look at each of these options and goes, what does it cost us? And how easily is this going to get passed? And of your 3 options, option 1 is your only one that's going to make it. Because option 2 is going to involve this study, which involves staff power and dollars, which means our dues dollars would have to be utilized and allocated to do that study. And then that doesn't necessarily get you anywhere. And legislation is about 20 times more expensive than a study, because that involves us engaging our lobbyists to do such a thing. So if you're going from a political standpoint, option 1 is going to make it.
Well, option 1 could get done just because they'd say, hey, we're going to do it.
Right, I mean, like we did. I mean, we did
That's what I
our
was gonna
bid
say,
process.
yes.
We've already got that in place.
And you can
other
always make it
districts
more
do too.
stringent.
And they could come up with a policy that we approve every month. To answer your question, Greg, the colleges have already passed where they can't use this exception to the school code. The difference is colleges aren't run by boards, they're run by regents, and it's a whole different. We had more than one drink that night.
But we do have a policy in place that we've put in, so this doesn't affect us.
It won't happen here.
It won't happen here, but you're trying to affect it statewide, correct?
Encourage it.
Encourage.
Number 1 is the easy one, to bring it in front of all 900 school districts. So,
And then the organization that supports us in our functions is telling us that it's a good idea to competitively bid your technology project.
That's what it is.
And
basically,
that's a
that was
decent-
easy. I might add something about, I'm gonna have him help me, but something about, and come up with a policy through press. Just add on something like that. If that's. So Brandon, you wanna move that we pick option 1?
So moved.
I'll second.
Any other questions for Dwayne? Betsy?
Yep. Brewer,
Yes.
DeRoche,
Yes.
Maddox.
Yes.
Zerman,
Yes.
Worley.
Yes.
Yurevich.
Yes.
And Cobb.
Yes. Dwayne, thanks. Moving on, communications, we got to set board meeting dates for FY 17-18 school year. Right?
And just, I will make note, I just want to let you know that, you know, one of the things that the board has communicated, and we think is a good idea, is to have our leaders give presentations on the status of their particular areas, and so we've done that, and that reflects in this calendar. How many directors we have? 8.
These are all the same dates we've seen before, yes?
Their dates, their corresponding dates, there may be a couple of changes or shifts due to other dates or conflicts, but for the most part, those are corresponding dates to the prior year.
And we added director presentations. You caught that, right?
Yeah. Director presentations.
Can you explain to me what is this first column and the second?
The first column is last year's.
Okay,
Yeah, the first column is last year's, the second column is proposed for this year,
okay.
and then the reports that we're gonna do are in the third column.
So moved.
Okay?
Give me a second. So all the meetings
Second.
are on Mondays? Give me a second. All the meetings
Sorry.
are Mondays?
Yes.
For the most part.
Okay. Probably for this semester I cannot make it because Mondays evenings I have a class all Mondays.
That would end in December?
Yeah,
Or July 24th.
that's fine.
And that's also those two reports.
Okay.
We can wait for or how many months would that be?
Yeah.
5 months?
Yeah, August.
Well, let's
Well, let's see if we can maybe,
adjust a couple.
We can always
Yeah.
tweak later.
yeah,
We can
let's,
set the calendar now and alter them.
yeah, let's see what we can do to help.
And also I have to know if you guys are sticking with Monday for next year because I have to review my schedule in the beginning of the August.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. We'll make some adjustments. Let's adopt this and then I'll make some proposed changes.
Because I can change my class Monday to Wednesday for next semester.
Starting in January.
Okay. August I can because I'm.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Betsy, please.
Yep. Dewey Rush,
Yes.
Maddox,
Yes.
Siren,
Yes.
Worley,
Yes.
Gurevich,
Yes.
Brewer,
Yes.
and Cobb.
Yes. Moving on to 10-2, appoint policy committee members. So is this all policies, or are we just?
No, just the actual policy committee. We, now with Lisa and
Okay.
Kim, or
Linda.
Linda. Lisa and Linda. No longer here. Sorry, I looked at you, Kim, and I had Kim on my mind. So we do need 2 more members. You know, this is one I think it'd create an opportunity, number 1, to have an existing board member. That's something that we will serve on.
You're looking
For
at me?
president, and then have one of our new members, it might be a good opportunity to incorporate some.
And how often do you meet on these?
You know what, when press sends us information, Joe pushes that out, and we often share via technology, because a lot of it is set. What's
Like 2 to
it?
3 times a year.
Yeah, yeah. It's-
Okay.
it-
We can split it too. It's been known that like one board member takes.
Are
it
you
for-
wanting to do it?
No, I mean, no. I'm saying I'm helping you out, Steve.
I will do it if you would like me to.
If you would, that'd be
And then
great. and
I'll
then-
push it off to Susan if I can, how's that?
Well, yeah, we split it up by time.
Okay, and then who else were you thinking we need 2?
Policy committee,
Well-
explain to me what is that, so.
Policy committee, we meet 5 days a week.
On Mondays.
100%
From 9 PM until 2 AM. No. No, policy committee will meet 2-3 times. We have press, and that is, they update all of our policy in accordance with our handbooks and state, federal legislation. So, you know, with your schedule, it might be difficult. I don't know. Bill might want to, and then maybe you can dovetail it.
Well, I was just going to interject with this. First of all, I will do it. However, you know, one of the things that Srini has that I do not have is the educator background. I know in the past, it seems like Linda was a value
That's
added
a valid-
she had on it.
If it is not on Monday evenings, I can.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, then let's go ahead and do that, and if we switch off, or maybe even if we have another vacancy, so Steve and Srini,
Sounds good.
okay?
So Bill, did you just offer to do the delegate in Chicago?
That's what I heard him say.
Well, then, Waken, I need to get in the business of selling hearing aids then, because I'm not convinced that's what I said. However, is anyone else attending that Chicago meeting on this board?
Actually, Dwayne, I would like to point out that if your
most of
resolution
us
goes
will go.
before the whole delegate assembly, you should be there.
This is your
And
resolution.
It's your resolution.
We don't know if it's going to make the floor.
Let me just tell you, it's deadly.
If you have the,
And
it should make the floor.
it's deadly. So let's just leave that as an open
But
item.
other than that,
And just so I'm clear, we're referencing the November 19th, 20th, 21st weekend in
Yes,
Chicago,
yes.
right?
I need a hearing aid too.
As a new board member, it's probably not the best way to spend your first III conference because there's so many good seminars to go to.
Very true.
Well, hopefully I am there to root Dwayne on.
yeah, I think that's right.
Okay, do we need to nominate?
If you want to get involved in the
let's-
politics of the Association of School Boards, then delegate assembly is where you want to go. If you don't, then stay away from it.
It's probably always best to observe
Yeah.
before you interact.
I stay away from
You
it.
can volunteer. Well,
Okay, we good on committees then?
well, and then also a division representative, but can we just call it quits for tonight? Continue discussion.
I agree with you.
It's just an open item on
Yeah, it's-
delegate.
We probably, I don't think anyone wants to, but we got to offer the citizens the opportunity.
Oh, yeah, we
address
haven't
on
adjourned
anything.
yet, don't worry.
Oh, we still got some. So you're good
This is
on
a
yeah,
voting.
I'm
committees
good,
then?
I'm good.
Set up
Is
committees?
Yes.
The committee members?
Yeah, it's
So
an
moved.
action item, actually.
Oh,
Second? Bill?
You second?
We're voting on,
Did you
Dwayne?
say?
sure, second.
Policy committee.
All right, Maddox.
Yep.
Siren. Siren.
Yes.
Worley.
Yes.
Yurevich.
Yes.
Brewer.
Yes.
Duraraj.
Yes.
And Cott. And Cott.
Yes. Moving on, 10-3. Anybody got anything they want to run by the board on anything that came to mind while you're sitting here?
Cameraman.
How much rain we got?
Did you get your windows up?
How's your air conditioner working?
Oh,
All right, very good. Jim, you're welcome to come back anytime.
Oh, man, you know what? I think you filled me for a while now.
This is a special.
oh, wait, it was your last one. Let's wait another hour to adjourn.
It's only fitting, Jim, that you should.
I'll come back and
We could
say
stay
hi.
another 60 minutes and then it could maybe beat one of the long meetings we had.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion to adjourn.
Yep, got him in now.
All those in favor? Those opposed? Good night, everybody. Thanks for coming.